we want to carry on from where we stopped last time. And we can remember we already created a database called COVID patients. And we created a table called TBL patients. We can remember we did columns or what you call fields, which you can see here: patient ID, sorry, name, ID number, date of birth, is active, and the rest. Now, so what we're going to do today is to build an interface using Visual Studio and C# programming language. So I'll go straight away here to my machine and type in Visual. So you make sure that you've installed Visual Studio. So like here, I have Visual Studio 2015. When I click, it loads there. And to start a new project in Visual Studio, all you have to do is to click on New Project. So like there, I click there, New Project. And I have different projects I can do from here. I can do a console application, WPF, a class library, name them. But like we saw in the first video, we said we can do a Windows Forms application, or actually that is a desktop application, and that is what I said we wanted to use this project to build on. So come here and select Windows Forms application. This is going to be the name of the project. So and this is the location on your machine where it's going to be saved. So you can browse to change the folder and save it elsewhere, or you can just leave it at default location. This is going to be important when you want to open later, so you need to know where that project was stored. So here we have by default the name is Windows Forms application, but so you can rename by calling it COVID project. So the solution name also is COVID project. We don't want to go further into the details of that, but from there you simply click on OK. So once you click on OK, this is what is going to happen. You're going to have that as COVID project. It has created for us one form called Form 1. And that is the main thing that we are going to do. So to get here, you can click on View Solution Explorer, and that is how you're going to view what is there. So here, this is Form 1. I can rename and still using the naming, what I call nomenclature, the way I like it. For the object table, remember we called it TBL because that was a table. Now for the form, I like it calling FRM. So here, it is just taking what was on the database to the interface. And what's happening here is that, so the form here is going to be the table here, because that is what is going to represent the database. So that is basically how it can be, or simply how it can be. But like we're going to see later, more than one table or more than one form may not necessarily represent each other. But simply, when you're learning from scratch, a table will mean that you have a form for that table. And now, this is TBL patients. So here, I'll call this FRM patients. So I just come here, click on it, and then I'm able to FRM patients, because this is what is going to represent our table. This is where we are going to capture. So says you're renaming a file. Would you also like to perform a rename in the project and all references to the code element Form 1? Click on yes. So now here, up here has changed FRM patients, and that is how our form is. So this represents the table. Now, next is, now we want to create the fields that we have from here. So the first one is name, and the data type, remember we talked about the data types, was varchar or text. So that one will be represented here by a text box. So here we come to toolbox. If you can't see toolbox from here, you can go view toolbox. Then that toolbox will be able to come here. I can resize it this way for me to be able to view the toolbox here and my form. So this is what we call controls. These are what we call controls. And the control for text, which is enval in the database, is text or text box. So that one, we look for text box from here. So I come here, look for text box, and I drag it there. Good. Now with that, I can still nicely make it there because I expect the name to cover a big space. So that is how it is. Now if I right click here on this text box and go to the properties, it will open the properties here. I can close this. So these are the properties. So the text is what is captured here. For example, I can type in something here and you'll be able to see that there is text here. So the text property is what is going to have text in there. But for now, I'm not interested in having the text property because every time I want to come there, I want to find it empty. So I come here next. The name is very important. So here, this is a text box. And we're expecting that it will be capturing the name. And hence, the name of that text box will be txt name. There we go. Now, so we will also need to have something called a label. So a label for this case is somewhere where the client will know what are they expected to capture. And I'll come there and I must not put in the name there. I can leave it as label 1, but the name here will be name. So that is the name, and my text box is txt name. Next control is what is going to capture ID number. And for that case, I'll drag another text box for ID number. So I come in here, look for my control text box, pick it from here. ID number can be that. If I press control on my keyboard and drag that label, it can still come here. Sorry, there. So that is the label for ID number. And the name for my control is txt because it's text box ID number. Next is DOB, date of birth, and the data type for that is date. Hence, for date, I'll use a date picker control. So I look for a date picker here, date time picker, which is here. Drag it here and control, hold down and drag. Sorry, control, hold down and drag. Or optionally, you can just go back for a label. So the label is going to take in the text which should appear on our label is DOB, and that is date picker. Now I like naming them DTP, now DOB. Yeah. Now there's something I like about the formatting of our date, like you can see here. There's what we call format, and the date we are seeing there is called long. You can change to short, You see, it becomes 03 June 2020, or it can be anything else. For example, custom. So you can change or time or custom or anything else. So you can leave it at short. Now, next is gender is varchar, which is text, but we may want to this time around use a different control because I want us to use as many controls as possible. So we can actually have a drop down or what you call a combo box instead. So you can have it here, and then you can add items. So we can say male, female, for example. Then click OK. And now we need a label for that. So we bring it here. Make sure that is how it is. Now we change the text for the label. So come here, and this is gender. Yeah. Great. Now, next is country. Also say that in future we are going to use a combo box so that we pick the countries from a drop down. But for now, we can use a text box so that we capture in. So for the sake of this project, we can still have text box because that is varchar. So I come in here, and then I can expand it. Then notice that blue line. It shows me, Visual Studio gives me a chance to easily know if I wanted to have a similar length to the other one. So as I drag and it gets to the same level, that is what happens. So this is for country. So I come in here and say this is country. Then I remember to change my text box as well. So this is txt country. And this was my combo box, by the way, which is combo box 1. I can say CMB for combo, and then gender. So you'll notice later it's good to name or to give names that you can easily remember to the different controls. Next and last actually is active. So is active is Boolean or what you call bit, and you can use what you call option buttons, or for this case I want us to use what you call a checkbox. So checkbox will enable you to say yes or no by either ticking it or unticking it. So I'm looking for checkbox here. Checkbox. So I drag here, align it to the left of those other controls, and I change the name to is active. Now, notice that is active is a name, but the text that is going to be displayed goes to a property called text, which is there. And this is, I can say is active. Or I can basically, yeah, I can say it's active, that's fine. Or I can basically write active so that it's yes or no. Now, if by default, most of the patients we are capturing are active, you can have the default value here checked to be true, so that it is always checked before you uncheck it. You can simply put it that way. Now, so my form still reads form 1 here, and I may also need to name it, to name the text, because form 1 is what we are seeing here. FRM patients is the name of the form, but the text that is being displayed up here is form 1. It will always be good to have a name that can easily make the user know what they are capturing. And for this, I'll say patients. that is the simplest way to build a form from the database. So what we are basically doing is that whatever we discussed on the things that were going to the database are the same things that actually come to the interface in terms of the form. So we can see that is the name, that is the ID number, that is, and so on. Now, finally, for this form will need to take in values from this interface to the database, and hence we need the controls for clicking. So usually someone would easily want to use buttons. So like here, you can have a button to say, that is button 1, and have that button to say new if you want to clear records. Then have another button to say save. Then have another button for deleting. So I can come here and have delete. So I can have buttons there for different functions within the interface. Now, we can test the project so far, see that it doesn't have any bugs or any errors, and it can actually run. So you can come here and click on that start button. So I click here, start. So something is happening. We can see from there. There we go. So this is our running application. This is our running application, and I should be able to, or a user should be able to capture in the name there, ID number, date of birth. Realize that when I click here, it brings a calendar-like control, which is a date picker. You can easily select a date by clicking here, or basically coming here. You'll see the different years. So I go back so fast, things like that. Or I can just click here and type in a date. So I can type in from my keyboard 1997. Which month? I can type 4, so it goes to April. What was the date? 6th, for example. Then look at the combo box that we created. That is it. So I can pick the gender from there. And country, Kenya. So this is by default is active, so you can active or not. And then now we expect that when we click on save, it sends that data to the database table that we created. When we click new, then it clears the text boxes or the controls for me to capture the next item. And then delete should actually be able to delete the items that have been selected to the screen. And this is the step of building that to an interface. Once you get to this, then we can already start seeing that the project is coming up. From the design, we were able to identify what we want to do, which was actually the requirement. We were able to discuss the things that will feed into that database. We're able to know that there's a database that will store that information inside tables, and tables will have fields. And now, after that, we come and create an interface that the client will simply use without knowing all these data structures and all that. They just simply want to click on new, and they come in and capture the details, click on save, and that record goes to the database. And that is what we're going to learn next. Thank you. Now, So for these controls to work, the button control, the save, the delete, and the new, you need to code. So now this is where we have to write a few lines of code. So everything, a click. I know people have heard about clicking of a button. So every click of a button here, that's an event behind the scenes. And that is where we need to write code. So right here, we've been seeing that we've actually seen the properties. So we've been seeing the properties like text, like check for checkbox, date for date picker, and any other. So the properties is what is displayed here. But this is what you call events. So when we click here, you're able to see the different events of the different controls. So for example, the click event, or the drag and drop, or key down event, and so on. So what we are going to do here is, the question would be, what do we want to happen when someone clicks on new? So if I double click on this button, new button here, it will actually open some other window where we need to write some piece of code. We're going to write using C#. So you see the button is button 1, and it's saying the click event. So this is where we need to write code. And that is what we are going to look at next. Now, for me, I like using a control here called tool strip. Instead of using the buttons, I like using a tool strip. So this is what happens. When you drag tool strip to the form, it gets created down here. So there is this, it comes here, but I'm able to see it come up here. Now, what I like about Visual Studio is that it gives me a chance of inserting standard items to a tool strip. So if I click on insert standard items, there you go. Now I have, instead of having a new button here, I have that new button up there. I have another open window, or open button up there, which we are going to see later. We're going to use it to open a listing of all existing records or data within a table. Then we have a save. Instead of using this save button, then I'm going to use that save. To print an item, I can use that button. Usually I like, instead of this being cut, I change it to delete instead. So instead of using these buttons here, I instead use a tool strip control. This is where we are going to write code instead of the buttons that I have here. So you'll allow me to highlight all the three and delete them. So instead of using the buttons that I had there, I'll use that instead. So I'll come here and double click on that new, which, just like the button that we had created, it creates some code here. So what do I want to do when someone clicks on new? What I want to do is that I want to clear the controls for the next item to be captured. So I'll come here, and the simplest code here is this way. So I know I had something called txt, and this comes up. So I had txt name. So I'm changing the property text. So I'll say is equals to empty string. And the syntax for C# is that every line in basic way must have a semicolon at the end. So this is txt name dot text, which is the property text, is equals to empty string. I know I'll have an error here because of the control that I or a bug. Let's see what happens. If you've been following the steps I did, then chances are you'll get here with a bug. If I run that start, then let's see what happens. Okay, that's strange. Let's proceed. Now click on new, and that disappears. So that is what it means by clearing. New, and the text, type in new, and that clears. But look, so if I have a name here and I type in ID number there, then I click on new, it only clears the name. Why is it clearing that part alone? It is because we've only coded that part. We've said txt name.text is equals to empty string, but we've not done that for the ID number. We've not done that for our combo box here. We've not done that for the country here. We've not done anything for the active or not. So again, if I click on new, then that is the only one that clears. So what we need to do is that we need to make everything else clear, or we need to set that to default. So I come back here, I double click here, it comes here. Now, so I need to do to the rest. So txt ID number dot text is equals to empty string as well. Txt country dot text is equals to. What other control did we have? We had, let's check. We have date picker. So I can say dtp dot value. That one we say value is equals to, we can default it to even today, but now that may not be a good time, but let's just do that. Date time today. Then next, combo box, it uses what it calls selected index. So cmb.gender selected index, we can say is equals to -1. We're going to explain further that in the coming sessions. Why it's not 0, why it's not 1. That is what we are going to learn. But now let's run that project again. Now type in the name here, ID number, date of birth, gender, country, is active, no. And by the way, we don't have, this is a code we are looking at here. We've not done anything for the checkbox, so we need to do something. But let's click on new. Boom, that's what happens. Then look, the data has come back to today because of what we are doing there. So checkbox, if we need it to be, so we say dot check is equals to true, so that by default a new patient is active. One more thing that is very important is that it will be important to set up what we call setting focus or the cursor there. So if realize if I'm doing that, and then picking something here, then clicking on new, the cursor goes to the gender. But for the interface to be user friendly, we need to take that cursor back here. So always I would take back the cursor by saying take focus. So txt name, that is the one I want to focus. Dot focus. Yep, that is it. Dot focus. Now let's like saving that, run. Now, so I come in here, there's a name, the ID number, gender, um, something like that, and then new. There, the focus goes back to the name. The focus goes back to the name. So this is the C# code, C# syntax, so to speak. That is how to um, clear items. Now, so the text item, for example, I can come in here and say, if I wanted to default that to Joe, look, so that is how to insert text to a text box. So if I came here, then click new, then Joe comes there. So even if I had something else, then that, then Joe comes there. So that is how, if I do that and remove Joe, it means we are doing an empty string. So that is what we are doing for text, txt name, txt ID number, txt country, date of birth. We are taking that to today. Selected index. Did we see what happened to that? So if I had male selected and then clicking new, then it goes. Why? Is because we are setting the selected index to -1. Let's look at that. If I had done 0, run, save, run, sorry, run, male, let's say other, then click on new, then it goes back to male. So in other words, male is at index 0, female is at index 1, other is at index 2. That means if we don't want anything to be selected, we say -1. So it clears the combo box. So that is how the index, the selected index, is cleared from the combo box. So I come back here. Let's try 1. Then come here, do that. Select other, then new becomes female because the selected index is 1. So at that point in time, we have that as 0. So for active, we are saying checked is equals to true. So if I came here, click new, checked is true. If I did that, new, checked is becoming true. So that is how to have it checked or not. Then focus is taking that cursor back there. So next we want to look at the save button. So I come here, double click. It takes me here where I need to the click event of the save button, where I need to write code. And before you send the information to the database, you need to do what you call validation. So we need to validate the entries that the user is capturing in here. So one of the simplest validations is to make sure that the name that has been captured here is not empty. So remember that already on new it's empty. So we are going to introduce something called the if statement. And this is what we're going to do. So we'll write if, then say txt name dot text, and we have an operator here is equals to empty. So here we are writing two equal signs. Then we need to introduce curly braces there. So this is what happens. It will check if that is empty. We need to raise a message to the user. So we say message box, that one, dot show. Then we have text in there. Patient name is required. Look at that. So save and run. So if I click on save, boom, patient name is required. So this is what we call a message box. So message box is a box that will give a message to the user, and it's you to write any message here. So you can come there and say, you can change that and say, please enter the patient's name. Now, there are a few things that I want us to learn here. So what I want to do here is to copy that and then paste it here, and then try and do this and say, please enter the ID number. Let's look at what happens there. So if I save and run, and then now click on save, so it says, please enter the patient name. Then it says again, please enter the ID number. That should not be the case. That should not be the case. Now, so what happens here is that we're getting a message that gives us that, then we are getting the same message that comes out. But this should not be the case, because it should stop at that point. So that stops by typing a return there. So return means it doesn't continue executing the rest of the lines. So it is important to do return after that. So that is what we do. Save, run. Now let's see what happens. So I come here and type no, sorry, and click save. So it says, please enter patient name. That is it. It doesn't go to the ID. But one more thing is that, so I come here, click save, please enter patient name. But realize that the focus is still within the ID number. So it is always necessary to return the focus to the text box that you are validating. So I come here and say txt name dot focus. The same thing here, I should say txt ID number dot focus. Now look, so come here, and then, so if I'm here and then save, come here, click on save, and the focus goes back to the text box. Now if I type in the name there, save, now we are getting the other message, please enter the ID number, and you click OK, it focuses on that. So that is what we call validation. And the is equals to operator, these two is equals to operators are different from that one. Here we are assigning value. Here we are checking if the value is equals to that. But there's still one thing though, for us to make sure that we are testing it fully. Come here, put some space on that name, and then click on save. It says please enter ID number, because it's realizing that because there is some space in there, and we are checking if the text box was empty, which is not, because it has some spaces. So to get out the spaces, or to take out the spaces, we introduce something here, or a function called .trim. So that is what to do there. So you have to do that here. .trim. So if I come back here, try the same thing, and then click on save. says please enter the patient name, because now the text that is here has been trimmed, or the spaces have been removed before you check if it's empty. So that is what happens. So that is validating. That is how to validate using an if statement. So let's go back here. So that is how to do if. It will always be within the brackets. Then what you're testing is in here. So you're checking if that is empty. If it's empty, it comes in here and then does all that. We can actually look at that by clicking here, so that we can do what we call stepping into the code. So let's check, continue, save. So the cursor comes there. If I press F10 on my keyboard, you see what it's doing. It comes in here. Then it continues. I press enter. It focuses and then returns. And that is, now goes to line 51, because it's going back to that. So that is it. But if we had a name here, then now we save. So F10. So look at that. It came from line 38 to line 45 here, because this is not true. So it only goes in here if it's true. But if it's not, it goes on to test the next few lines.